Hello, good afternoon. It is Wednesday, the 1st of December. Can you believe that we are already on the home stretch of 2021, which has not been my favorite year, I won't lie, particularly the events of the last week. I think today's webinar is very opportune. We were actually thinking about whether or not we should go ahead with it, but at the end of the day, I think we can all agree on this call that tourism often has to deal with crises, and this is a series around how to deal with those crises. So it is still important that we have this discussion today. We're just going to wait for everyone to get in the room and then we'll get going. So in the meantime, if you'd like to let us know where you are connecting from in the chat, we'd love to know. I am connecting from, I think it's near Sunset Beach, Milnerton, somewhere in Cape Town. Perhaps Rian, where are you connecting from? Where do we find you today?
I'm connecting from Franschhoek today.
Ah, nice place to be connecting from. Dewald, where are you connecting from?
Hello, Talia. Hello, everyone. Hello, panelists. Yeah, unfortunately, I'm on the other side of the spectrum. I'm from Johannesburg in Rand Park.
That's okay. We love Josie. It's all good. You're in good company. Rado, where are you connecting from?
I'm just close to Rand Park in sunny Bryanston.
Okay, well, maybe the two of you should have got together to have this webinar. You wouldn't have to be in split screens. Rutilio, where are you connecting from?
Hi, Natalia. Hello, everybody. I'm in Pietermaritzburg, KwaZulu-Natal.
Wow, I didn't know you were from Pietermaritzburg. Do you live there permanently?
That's where I live, yeah, but I work up in Umhlanga Rocks in Durban. That's where the office is.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. Kalk Bay. Lovely, PJ. Nice to see you. Andre, you're in KZN. I know. All good. Right. We'll give it another minute before we'll get going. Yeah, just a minute or two, I'd say. How's it, Diana? Strand. Krugersdorp. Dewald, why were you so disparaging about Joburg? Gauteng tourism is not going to be very excited about that.
Not disparaging at all. It's just I'd rather be in Franschhoek, to be honest.
No, I would also rather be in Franschhoek.
I don't blame you, Dewald.
Okay, all right. We are recording, so I think let us get going in the interest of time. So hello and welcome to the SATIV webinar on recovery after an incident. It is the third and final in our Ready, Response and Recovery series as we explore the nuts and bolts of incident management. Today we're going to be focusing on the importance and power of insurance and how businesses can use the lessons that we've learned to prevent future incidents and mitigate risks. I personally at the moment am dealing with one myself, not personally, but industry-wise, and I'm really interested to hear what our panelists are going to be sharing with us today. How we deal with those disasters, what are the lessons that we can learn to mitigate those risks in the future. And it really is just a progression of what it is that we've spoken about in the last two webinars that we have had. But before I even go down that road, I want to introduce my amazing panelists today. And I'm going to start with Rutilio, all the way from Pietermaritzburg, who's the executive head of group claims for the Post Equity Insurance Group. Rado Yankov, who I've never met before, is his first time on a webinar with me. Nice to meet you, Rado, is the operations manager at Bryanston Country Club. Lovely place to play golf. Rian Kruger from Franschhoek as the general manager and director from La Petite Fermée. And then we have Dewald Celia, who you guys will all know, his face, director of SATIV Insurance Brokers. I feel a little bit like the rose amongst the thorns today, gentlemen. Next time, more women, just saying. Anyway, I'm going to kick off with Dewald, and maybe we can just go back a step or two and spend a minute talking about the different types of incidents that we would have to deal with in the tourism industry. You're at the coalface. What is it that comes across your desk from time to time?
Yeah, thank you, Natalia, and thank you very much for the introduction. And again, welcome to everyone. Quite chuffed that you all managed to take the time to dial in. Natalia, it's quite a diverse field, especially in the hospitality industry, considering there are so many different activities and operations within the industry. So it could be anything from when a booking is made right through to where there is actual structural losses and at certain properties, or even in worst case scenarios where there are third party bodily harm or losses as a result of incidents at properties or on the way to property. So it's quite diverse. But I do think it's, as a start, before we get into the nuts and bolts, it's important to understand the role of insurance in your entire risk portfolio. And for all intents and purposes, insurance is probably your last line of defense. That is your safety net when all else has failed, or when there is a perfect storm and whatever you've implemented could not prevent the loss to happen. So once that concept is understood and understanding where that fits into the risk mitigation pie, it's quite clear to then understand how the insurance policy will respond relating to insured perils, trigger points, etc., etc. So I think the most important aspect of ensuring incidents do not happen, or trying to mitigate the frequency of incidents happening, is to ensure that your planning upfront and your steps that you have taken in terms of your business and whatever risks are associated to that is in place, and then also to have then a proper insurance policy by the backing of a specialist insurance broker to ensure that you know that if the inevitable is going to happen, that you have the proper policies in place.
And that is the thing, is that you can't actually predict. But you mentioned a word, and I'm sorry, so forgive me if this is a doff question, but you mentioned the word trigger. And, I want to understand that a little bit better. So perhaps you can give me a couple of examples of what a policy trigger would be for an insurance policy to respond to a specific situation.
Yeah, so a policy will respond once one of the perils have triggered an event or a loss at any of your insured entities or assets. So a trigger could be a lightning strike on a roof. It could be an accident on the road. It can be an erroneous booking made at booking stage. It essentially ties back to the insured perils that are stated on your policy. Lightning storm, fire, flood, recently COVID, infectious disease, etc., etc. So this is what that relates to, is that particular trigger or event that triggers the response of the policy.
But presumably you would, when you were dealing with your specialist broker, you wouldn't have a policy that responds to things that are silly in a way, like smaller things, because wouldn't that you would try and define what those risks are going to be, essentially, the ones that are really going to impact your business specifically. You're not going to insure against something that is quite easily paid for or resolved, without there having an insurance policy in place. Wouldn't that up your premium? I'm just asking out of interest.
Well, yeah, so it's all about risk appetite, Natalia. So it's all dependent on each individual to determine what their risk appetite is, what risk they feel or view that they wish to carry on their balance sheets during a trading year. So this also ties in with excesses on policy, so which is usually the most known mechanism in order to determine what your own risk appetite is. So when you do push up your excesses, it basically states to the insurer that you are willing to take more of the attritional, smaller, more frequent type of losses on your balance sheet, rather than to place that risk over onto an insurer. And your view then is that you are rather wanting to insure for catastrophic losses than the smaller punitive type of losses.
Yeah, okay, that makes a lot of sense. Okay, so we have a couple of individuals within the room who no doubt have had a disaster of some sort or an incident of some sort strike, and have had to have learned some good lessons. Before we go through to them, Dewald and Rutilio, if I can just stay with you and find out what are the things that Rado and Rian would have done to streamline the claims process when something happens, because we know, if we look at the last 20 months and how long things have taken to wind themselves up, we're still waiting in certain areas. Speed is of the essence. So making sure that they have the right documents, for example, readily available, photos or videos of stuff that they need to have now, prepared for now, when something happens that they're going to need to put a claim together. Maybe I'll start with Rutilio, if you wouldn't mind.
Good afternoon, guys. It's not a difficult question to ask, but it's an involving question to respond to. When something, if anything, happens that you would like or you think you should be claiming for, because in some instances something will happen and maybe you don't think insurance immediately. But for me, in the present day and age, you usually have your phone on you. Take pictures, you can record. It helps. Record, take pictures, and you never know when they could become useful. But if I want to take a step back and go back to COVID, we cannot view the insurance industry in the lens or prism of COVID. COVID is a once in a lifetime type of event. I've worked in the insurance industry for 30 years, and this is the first time we've encountered something as unique as COVID-19. It's not something that is a run-of-the-mill kind of thing. But when it does happen, hindsight is 20/20 vision. When it does happen, you find that you need to be prepared, and you need to do what it takes at the point in time in order for you to be able to report adequately. Devil was talking about a lightning strike. Okay, you take pictures; they help. If you can take pictures of the damage, it helps. You take a video or you record. It makes it that much easier for you to report your claim and record your claim. So for me, it's one of those things that you may do automatically without thinking that in the end can really become crucial. But if you look at such events such as COVID-19, for example, you can prepare all you want, but the curveball is coming, and it's coming.
Sage words. Okay, Deval, did you want to add anything to what Rutilio said?
Yeah, absolutely, Natalia. And I mean, it's so true what Rutilio is saying. And I mean, from our perspective and the insurers that we work with, and again, unfortunately, or not, fortunately, I've got my setup hat on, and we, being the specialist in the industry, it's working with our insurers. Our view has always been rather be prepared than trying to put out the flames as such afterwards. So a lot of our interaction with our clients is ensuring that they understand the risks that are associated to their business, understand the seasonality of the risks associated to the business, because that's quite important as well. And then implement steps and procedures in order to try and minimize any potential claims that do come through. Yes, we're going to have the catastrophic events where lightning strikes or a felt fire or a vehicle incident or what have you, but it's important to understand that, for the likes of a Rian and a Rido, what we have done with them is making sure that we prepare upfront for the incident. Any catastrophic loss is quite a big event in anyone's life. And from our experience is that in the moment of the event, any individual, any human being's ability to think laterally in an emergency is largely reduced. So being prepared, knowing what potentially could happen, and then having the potential of getting the assistance of specialists behind you on a phone to try or to assist you in managing the scenario and the critical incident. That's
I think that's a really good point. Your ability to think when you are dealing in that kind of crisis mode. I'm going to bring Rado in, if I may, just to comment a little bit about what you and Rutilio have been saying.
I agree 100% with Deval. We should be prepared. And for my 20 years experience in Bryanston Country Club, we are ready almost on every event, except we don't expect COVID. Nobody in the world expects COVID, and the coming back from that event is quite significant. And we're learning all from our mistakes and and next year we're going to add on that policy something else. Because, for example, your staff bus is in an accident and you can't drive today the staff which are on duty. It's about 40 people, and we are in some kind of crisis management at the moment because it's not in actual policy. We're going to add it next year, but if we prepare in advance, that's going to be fantastic, because there's not going to be a claim problem. What I mean that if we try to predict the event and try to predict the risk, and it's not going to be a loss. Am I right, Deval? So it is experience. You keep a good database. If I can give you some advices, you keep good database of suppliers, meaning that you identify your most biggest risk in your property, and you can put a good database of suppliers and people that you can rely. Also, unfortunately, the people doesn't work only for you. If there's a lightning strike in the area and it's hitting Round Park and it's hitting us and it's hitting all over the place. So this is one of the most common problems that we occurring. What we've done, we keep a spare equipment that we can react quickly, very quickly. And on the day of the event, what I'm doing, I'm notifying the insurance company it's a possible claim that's going to come through, and then my team of people, they start identifying where is the problematic areas, where has been hit. Let's say if it's a lightning event, and we start fixing. We're not preparing straight on the paperwork, because we need to bring the site as quick as possible in operational level, meaning that we need to operate. And then the paperwork is almost done immediately, because we have also preparations. We have our forms in place. We have, everybody knows that we're requiring photographs, videos, and all of these things. So we're reacting very quickly. And I'm sure that it's helping mostly to bring back the business to operational levels.
Because Rado, that's essentially what's needed. You want to get back to business as usual as quickly as possible. So you do need to do a bit of heavy lifting up front. Make sure, as Nick has said in the chat, streamlining things, making sure that all the COCs are in place, making sure that all of that prep is done, and that your team knows what needs to happen, has a proper crisis plan in place, where if this happens, then this happens essentially, and you get up and running, then you do all your paperwork, Devalt and his team kicking, and then everything is taken care of. That makes complete sense. Rian.
Absolutely. If I may add something else, we also working closely with the insurance company, and we identify this. It's not a relationship only according to a claim. We are working together to minimize and to bring down the potential events, meaning that if it's possible, in each claim that is being brought in, we looking to improve or to try to fix something. For example, a flood, what we can do to prevent the flood. We can do certain things, and we're sharing it with the insurance company. And if it's acceptable risk, we can build it and share costs. And that's the way that we need to do it in future.
Great. Rian, over to you. So you have obviously been through something in your business, and you've had to make sure, like Rado, that you are kicking in and getting back to business as usual. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, thank you, Natalia. Yeah, I think, fortunately or unfortunately, the longer you're in hospitality, then inevitably at some stage you'll have to deal with a claim of some sort or the other. So in the days when I was at Safari Lodges, it was fires. Recently, flooding with a rain. And the thing is, these type of scenarios you can't always predict. But I think key is, like some of the other gentlemen also said, is to be prepared. So specifically, if you partner with a specialist, a broker, like in tourism, like yourselves, they can also guide you, and you can prepare as much as possible in advance. But just like the insurance brokers are specialists, so are also some of the property managers and operators. So it's also up to them to mitigate the risk, therefore partner almost with the insurance company, because quite often, they'll guide you, or you have to make and do the assessments to also ensure how fire ready you are, or how, well prepared you are for an unfortunate incident. And also to speed up the claim, what I often, found working with some other properties most recently, as a collection rather, is also data, key elements, and I think like Rada said, database. But for us, what is important is a database, yes, of suppliers, but also more importantly, data, historic data of how your operation actually performed in the previous years. Because, quite often people get frustrated with insurance. Oh, my claim is taking long. But then if you don't have data ready, and especially sometimes your smaller properties, if you know the amount of bed nights, your historic revenue, your historic turnover, all of those, then that's also where the business interruption help, because obviously the actual damage, might be covered and that can be dealt with. But quite often, like something like COVID, that's not an actual product or physical thing that gets damaged. So that's more the business interruption side. And if you have that info prepared and work closely with your broker, that can be, to the advantage of your property itself. And also sometimes if you not work with a specialist, what I've found, in this industry, like I've had people, and I've heard where people in South Africa, God forbid, it might never happen, but if you're going to insure yourself, for a tsunami when you're in South Africa, and that I found, very unlikely that it's going to happen here. So yeah, maybe in South Africa it's more storm related, lightning related, fire related. So it's also specific to the area and the product that you're operating. So it's important to partner with the right people, because when that unfortunate eventuality, when it strikes and you're not prepared, whether it's at property level, having fire breaks, or, had your fire assessment done, have gutters checked for, because that's normally where the fires for properties, it's the things that people don't think about. You might have a fire break, but if you haven't cleaned your gutters, if you're somewhere on the garden route, or, somewhere in the bush for that matter. So sometimes those mitigations, and that's where it's important to partner with the right people, that you can be product ready or property ready, but also when the claim starts and the rebuilding, or whatever the process is, because there's so many levels that these unfortunate events can happen. So then you can start fixing, and you can start working on ground level, but the business interruptions and other elements, and the period that you insured for, all those things, play a role, because, you might think your business interruption, and then it's going to take 18 months to rebuild, or 12 months, and your indemnity period might be shorter. So there's all these other aspects that also play a role. So it's not just the insurance and the premium, like, Rotelia and Devolt and, the excess and all of that. It depends, like I've said, how risk averse you want to be. But in the end, yes, you might pay a little bit more on that premium. But we've seen now with COVID that little bit on the premium actually is not that much if you look long term. So yeah, I think there's various elements than just the policy or the premium.
You said tsunami, and I was holding on to the piece of wood next to me and thought, geez, I don't need that in my life now either. So thanks for that, Rian.
No, for sure. Yeah, well, I'll talk about fourth waves and third waves. Maybe that's it. I mean, just,
Stop, Rancho, stop. Devolt, it's Rian's talking about knowing his business and working with someone that knows his business. It's difficult for you to, to advise Rian if you don't have a good grip on the world that Rian lives in. Do you want to weigh in a little bit on what Rian was talking about?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, Rian was spot on, and so was Rada. The insurance relationship is a tripod relationship, and as important what it is to understand what steps you can take to try and prevent losses, or to be loss ready if the loss actually happens. It's as important to make sure that ultimately the insurer that you are being presented with whether it's 1 or 2 or 3 options, but that the insurer is also a specialist in the industry, and that they actually understand what your business is like and what the risks are involved. So, and I mean, I think the general feeling is that the broker should know that, but it's not always the case, because we do know that in the current financial climate, premium plays a massive role, and everyone wants to save on that expense line, which is already a massive expense line. But it is very important that to ensure that the insurer that you partner with, together with your broker, is a specialist, and that they actually understand what the risks are that you are transferring onto the insurance policy. And not all insurers have the same risk appetite. Some insurers would rather play in domestic markets. Other insurers would like to play in other specialist markets outside of the hospitality industry. So I think it's very important to make sure when you have the discussion with your broker is to ask the question and say, what expertise does the insurer that you are proposing have in my particular business? So that's such an important part of the risk lay of strategy in any event.
Dewald, you make an interesting point, and I know, having only been involved in the space in the last 18 months, following business interruption insurance issues and all the rest of it, this difference between an insurer and a broker, the layman says it's one and the same, and actually I realized that they're two very separate animals. Essentially, the broker is almost like the travel agent in between with a third-party supplier, if I'm bringing it back down to travel analogy, and the insurer is the third-party supplier. I don't know if you want to just lean in a little bit and tell us about that, because I know it was not something that I understood well 18 months ago.
Yeah, so Natalia, I mean, so ultimately, and I'm going to try and not bore anyone with the explanation, but the insurer ultimately is the second party with which the contract is being closed between the insured and the insurer. So if you want to put it this way, the insurer is the wallet, but the insurer only has a certain appetite, and he reflects that appetite and what he would want to reflect on where he would like to pay claims on the policy schedule, which is ultimately the contract. Now, the broker, being the intermediary, his role is to understand the insurer's appetite, where they want to play, how they want to play, what all the nitty-gritties of that is, and then also understand what the nature of the risks of the insured or the clients are. So at broker level, that is where the needs analyses are done, understanding where the concerns are, understanding what the business activities are, understanding what risks are associated, and then providing advice to the client in order for them to ultimately lay off their risk concerns to the insurer based on what their understanding and their risk appetite is. So ultimately, the insurer takes the risk based on the agreed contractual basis that has been negotiated and discussed by the broker with the client.
Okay, cool.
So the broker doesn't take any risk at all. There's no risk taken by the broker. Broker doesn't pay claims. Broker is there to fulfill the intermediary administrative function on behalf of both the insured and the insurer.
The only risk you take is getting yelled at, dear boss.
That's part of the job. I think everyone gets yelled in, doesn't matter what job you have.
No, that's true. Absolutely. Okay, let's get back to the topic, and that is around recovery and getting our claims paid out really quickly. And I'm going to ask Rutilio perhaps to help me with this. So now something has happened. Rado's had a lightning strike on Bryanston Country Club. I have been unable to finish my 18 holes. I'm devastated. I'm angry, but Rado has a much bigger problem. And so Rado gets his team to fix what needs to get fixed, and he gets in touch with Sativ and he says, guys, this is the damage. I want to make a claim. Rutilio, take me through the steps that one would need to take to log or to process a claim, just as a guideline. What are some of those steps that we need to keep in mind?
From a claims perspective, we really need to know what happened. Knowing what happened or what has happened allows us to be able to match what has happened to the cover that you have. Devold mentioned a policy schedule. There's also a wording that goes with the policy schedule. So as your broker, it's our job to look at what has happened to you and relate it to what you've got, the cover that you have. Once we know, so you'll find that ordinarily in any claim, the first thing that will probably come popping on your email address, when you're in your mailbox, is a claim form. So we'd like you to complete a claim form. But when you do, take care to complete it in such a way that it clearly reflects the incident in question. So you don't leave anybody guessing as to what happened. I've seen claim forms that have got a one line on them, but the claim is a 1 million rand claim. So you need to adequately describe what has happened. But what we were talking about before, if you've got any photographic video evidence of the actual event, even better. Okay, you'll find that as your brokers, say there's a lightning strike. When you tell us you've had a lightning strike, in return, we're going to send you a claim form and tell you what you need to send back together with the claim form. Okay, so that's where it starts. And us being the brokers, we're in the middle, like what Devold said, we're the intermediary. So it comes to us, we are going to take it to the insurance company. But here's the thing. Our job is to make sure that your claim goes into the insurance company complete first time. So you are going to minimize, or you don't get any back and forth that says, look, oh, please go and get this, or you need to go and get that, oh, we need that and that and that. We try to make sure that your claim goes in first time the correct way in the first instance. So that actually speeds up the processing of your claim. So depending upon the size of your claim, your insurance company may opt to appoint somebody else to come out and review the damage for them. That's where the assessment comes in. So in loss adjuster, loss assessor is appointed. They come out to your property and they deal with you. But I want to go back to what Rado and Rian mentioned earlier. You've got to understand your business. The one thing that I've learned over the last 18 months is that nothing takes away from that. You as our client have to understand your business. Just don't know where the money comes from. You've got to know how it works. Because when the loss adjuster comes out, they need to speak to somebody who's knowledgeable about the business. Some claims are simple. It's a matter of saying, look, there is a transformer. It was struck by lightning yesterday. Easy. Some claims are more complicated, where Rado is trying to say, look, they can't play golf on my golf course. They can't do it for the next 2 months. I'm going to lose so much money because that's not happening in the next 2 months. Slightly different, more complicated. It will need the client to understand their business and be able to relate meaningfully with the person who's doing the assessment of the claim, as it were. So you'll find that there are two basic situations. Your simple, easy claims. It might be a 1 million rand claim, but it's a transformer that was struck by lightning. You can point to the transformer, the person goes to the transformer, and they do what they do, and involves your uncle. Then we're talking about the different claim, the ones that we've been involved in the last 18 months, that need you to understand your business and be able to relate your activities meaningfully to the person who's doing the assessment. So at the end of the day, when the assessment is done, it goes back into the insurance company, they review it, and a settlement proposal is made. Settlement proposal comes out to you, we share it, and we are either agreeing with your insurance company to say, we're saying to you, listen, it is fine. It is in keeping with the cover that you have. It is all right. Or we're saying, we don't agree with it. We believe we should contest it. That's another different route. But in a nutshell, that's what it takes to make a claim. But I believe today we're talking about complex claims. Complex claims, you won't get away from what Rian and Rado talked about. You've got to understand your business. You've got to plan. I know Nick put in the chat something to do with risk mitigation. In simple terms, you've got to understand how your business works in a very simplified manner, but touching on the essence of what makes your business operate, what you need to have in place for you to continue trading, right? And then you then go to the other side and say to yourself, what if this happens? What if that happens? What if? Then you have a plan for most of the contingencies that you can see. So Rado talked about knowing your suppliers. You can't start running around trying to find a backup generator today when the one that you're using has been struck by lightning and you've not had Eskom power for the past 3 days. So you've got to know, my generator is no longer working. I'll call so-and-so, they will deliver a generator to me tomorrow because That's the agreement that we have in place with them. It's that kind of thinking that we need to come to the fore in order for insurance to work for us, or in order for us to be able to keep our businesses running in this environment that is getting harder and harder by the day.
Yeah, it's almost got to be kind of automatic in your head what the workflow looks like, what's going to roll out when, essentially. But I think the first step, though, is to phone your broker and to say to your broker, what is the process that is required? What are the documents that I'm needing to get together? Because it sounds like you need to get quite a lot of information together quickly. And also, just experiencing firsthand today from a crisis communications perspective, because there's a reputation issue that is at stake. What advice do you have for that person so that their reputation is not damaged? The broker might not be able to respond to that specifically, but they might be able to say, well, don't do this until you've spoken to that person, essentially. So I think that interface between when something happens, as Rado said, he's just gets his team on it and they fix it, but at the end of the day, get hold of your broker so that they can tell you what you need to do to get your claim in quickly so that you can get back to business as usual. If I can ask Rian and Rado, maybe Rado, you first, just your personal experience when something has happened, and talk me through how that has gone, having an inspector on site looking at things, making sure that they're looking at the right stuff. Tell me a little bit about what your personal experience has been when you've had to make a claim.
From our side, we operating a little bit more different than other people, meaning that we create teams that can assess damage and react immediately. We have suppliers on call that they can react quickly, and that's how we. That's the reason I said that the operations to us is the most important part. We need to operate first. That's it. And I mean, I have deadlines for my people to fix things. I'm not gonna wait and ask and pick up phones and call inspectors and that type of things. That's everything has been taken care in advance, and we often have if all scenarios. Let's say if the river come out of the bank, what is going to be the next step? So. Like I said before, it's everything is a preparation. Everything, you put your suppliers in place and tell you guys, we need to react quickly because of that and that and that, and we need to bring the business operating as soon as possible. And the generator is a very good example. When we living at the moment in generator country, when you turn all over, you can hear that generator hum from everywhere. So we need to be prepared. We need to make sure that we have enough diesel on site, and if the cable has struck by lightning outside, we operating. But what I can suggest to the insurance company and to the brokers, why they not take advice from their clients and create a database of all of these suppliers and all of these people with experience and hold it. For example, I'm looking for somebody to fix a palisade, and I'm not very good with that business. I never done it before. But when I pick up the phone and call my broker and says, guys, we have an event here. Do you know anybody that could do palisade? And they say, oh, hold on. Yeah, we got this guy. We use him in Bryanston Country Club. He's quite good. Go ahead. And that's could be a very good tool to the industry to keep that suppliers, and if all scenarios and that type of thing. Also, training is very important, I think. If you can recommend in your clients to do if all scenarios or management workings, or what we're going to do if is a fourth wave of COVID come to the country, what we're going to do? Are we prepared enough, or we're going to wait and see? So we sit around the table and we set ourselves right. What are we going to do? Did we have enough people? Did we have enough beers in our storerooms, or did we have enough food, or did we have enough drivers? So this is, I think, is a very good tool to help the clubs and the clients in the hospitality industry.
That's actually a really good point. DevOps on the list of things to get to, no doubt. Do you want to weigh in on that?
If you like me to, I mean, I think very quickly, Rhoda, you're absolutely correct, and there are companies that do have companies on their panels that they use and suggest. However, the view that we have taken throughout all the years is we'd rather you select your own trusted suppliers, and we, without us intervening, and have them assist you in these instances, rather than trying to push a supplier from the insurance side of things onto you. So that's the main reason. But I do take your point. It's definitely something that we'll look into.
Rian, tell me a little bit about your personal experience, the pains, the pleasures, how have things gone for you?
Yeah, I mean, some of the pains were obviously a bit early in a career when we've, the main lodge got struck by lightning, and obviously that's where the admin office and all of that was. So yeah, that meant you had to close for extensive period of time where you can't do business. So then it is important that you work with your broker hand in hand, like we said. Make sure the assessment gets done. You have your pictures, but then there's structural engineers that needs to be arranged to make sure. Do you demolish the building completely? Can you use the foundations? Do you just use certain walls? So it's quite complicated. It's also not just a matter of you put in a claim, they come out, and there's also these processes. And with that, sometimes it's not just like getting a generator. That's like you get shut down, and then it's like there's sometimes employees involved. How do you minimize certain expenses? Insurance will also look, did you save certain expenses? What did you do to mitigate your own risk, and able to make sure you can start operating later once the product is ready. Well, then if you look at flooding, so what I'm saying is when the eventuality takes place, then you also have to be proactive and decide there, do you first going to stop and see what can you minimize? If you're at the property, if something happens where you have to evacuate, then you sort of have to hope for the best, because then you're not there to mitigate your losses or your risk further. Then you're just going to make sure hopefully your insurance is good enough if something does turn for the worse. And then in between this, I mean, I've also worked with insurance companies who was not specialists in their fields, and we had a fire, and your operation, they need to evacuate, you need to set your guests up, you need, and those expenses you have to then carry until your claims are settled, or you have to evacuate a full restaurant. I mean, in Franschhoek, we've had those fires. So, at the time, and then also like the Rutilio and Dieval said, it's your partners, because obviously, even if you have the data, now you work with someone that's not a specialist broker in that field, that can take up to 5-6 months to get that settlement, where if you work with specialists and you make sure it's the specialist, because if you work with a specialist broker, the insurance company will also send out their assessor also that's got hopefully, some sort of experience or expertise in the hospitality industry. So, which will then assist the claim and the insurance company, so that you can meet halfway, to make sure that claim is like, it's not like just laying on the desk and every 2 months you got to follow up. What's happening with my claim? What's happening with my claim? Then you say, oh, what about business interruption? Your broker goes, oh yeah, sorry, what about the, and you sort of have to lead them. So, for me, that is important to work with. So those are really the joys, when you work with a specialist, and not so joyful when you work, with it's just an insurance policy, and the person think, okay, it's like property insurance or domestic short-term insurance where you have insurance on your property or your car, which that is not the case, because this is commercial. Yes, there's physical aspects attached to this policy, but you have to make sure that if you have a restaurant, you might have someone that food poisoning. And then it might not even be for food poisoning. So how do you first, once again, deal with it at property level? What are the symptoms? What are your team trained? Because, also people are people, and people will always take chances, as we know, in the hospitality industry. So it's not just always might be a physical, you'll get where someone might claim something differently. So you need to know how to, to deal with all eventualities. But what I'm trying to say is, even though someone might not, it might happen. So once again, that's to be prepared for it. If you're in the food business of hospitality, you need to know what could possibly go wrong. If food or accommodation, if someone's going to fall on a step, it doesn't need to be, a risk, which is, just that can happen at remote locations. So yeah, I think also having that guidance, helps, especially if someone is new to a hospitality industry. They don't always know, what are the pitfalls to look out for.
Yeah, basically speaking your language. Well, I know, Dewald, you speak golf and Rado speaks golf, so the two of you must be a match made in heaven. Rutilio.
Hi, sorry, I just wanted to respond to Terence Ward. He asked a question on the chat that says, what are the physical steps that one needs to follow? For example, there's an example there. I can't understate this one, because from where I'm sitting, I would rather you call your broker. I know Natasha spoke about it in the chat, but you can't really say this enough. Speak to your broker. Make sure that your broker fully understands what has happened. Because for me, that's where it starts. If you've got your broker on speed dial, something happens, you can either call them or you can send them a WhatsApp. And conversations are going to be had. We've had conversations, I think Dewald will back me up on this one. We've had conversations about your claims on a Sunday evening or a Saturday evening, over the weekend, during a holiday. So as long as your broker knows, then you're going to get the necessary advice that you need right off the bat. So you're not waiting 2-3 days before you get the necessary advice for what to do in that event. You are getting it right there and then, and you are actually exercising it right there and then. And as Rado and Rian will tell you, the advice that you get at the beginning of a claim is very, very important to how fast the claim is going to be concluded and how the journey towards conclusion is going to go. So I can't tell your broker.
Yeah. Rian, do you have Rutilio on speed dial?
No, unfortunately not, but I think I should get his number perhaps. Now on that point, just like he said, I think it's also just as important because we talk about insurance, you would always think of a loss or a physical event. And even a physical event can also be something that might destroy or give negative PR to your brand. So just as important to have your broker on speed dial when something does happen is also important, because they'll advise you what to do, but it's also important maybe what not to do, because, sometimes there might be a press release, or it might be better to say nothing than to say something. So when in doubt, call your broker and make sure you get the right guidance, because once again, we're in hospitality, but by doing a statement or saying something, if it might be a negative event, you might sometimes hurt your brand more than just mitigating or managing it by not saying anything at all. Luckily, I wasn't in that position, but it's like Rada said, it's one of those eventualities that you have to be prepared for. If something happens, what do I do? Let's say worst case scenario X happens. Well, get your broker to advise. Maybe get a PR company, write something, or don't say anything, or say something. Or so I think even those things, you gotta mitigate that when something happens.
Yeah, and that reputation damagement lasts a lot longer than the generator that's blown, essentially. Dewald, we had a question in the chat from PJ around, and I'm not sure you'll be able to respond to this, but let's give it a go. How does a company insure for events like COVID, where the insurer no longer covers those kinds of events, as wording constantly changes, creating gateways for the insurance company to not pay? So how do you insure for something that is not insurable?
Yeah, that's quite a difficult question to answer, and it's quite loaded. So, PJ, in terms of COVID, every single insurance policy around the world now absolutely excludes COVID, or infectious disease for that matter. So, as it stands right now, it's an uninsurable risk. I do believe that in the future, that infectious diseases cover will start coming back onto insurance policies. In what form, I'm not 100% sure. But it's very similar to what happened with when SASRIA was started way back when in the late 70s, early 80s, with all the riots and strikes, and that risk was taken onto at a government level and outside of insurance companies. So I don't think, and I do not believe, that insurers are trying to write their contracts with a view of not paying claims. I think we've all learned quite a valuable lesson in that insurance contracts and policies has to be written in a language that everyone understands. And that's probably the biggest single project that all insurers are currently working on, is to ensure that their policies are understood and written in a language that everyone can understand. So what the future will hold, I don't know. If Rian's tsunami comes through Bloemfontein, we probably will have tsunamis as an exclusion on the policies going forward. But yeah, we're going to have to wait and see. But Natalia, I just want to quickly add on to Rian what he said in terms of what steps needs to be taken. So from a SATA perspective, and I absolutely agree. I mean, the sooner you get your broker involved, the better. I mean, to get someone that is not in the mix of things at the moment can give you some form of clarity in terms of how you need to think and where you need to go. So, for instance, for SATIP clients, we've got SATIP 24, and that is the absolute first number that you phone in any event. So, and I'm not talking about a laptop being stolen or dropped in that type of scenario. I'm talking about your more catastrophic type of events. The first number that you phone is SATIP 24. Through that channel, usually we at a SATIP management level get involved, and we start assisting in whatever the crisis may be. So let's, as an example, so let's say that there is a medical emergency, or immediately that call will be triaged onto specialist doctors that will take over the medical emergency. If there are any costing issues, then we as SATIP management will be contacted to either agree or disagree to the additional costings. But when it relates to any other event, so for example, there's a veld fire, a raging fire going through Madikwe, heading towards a lodge, you know, from the point of view of trying to get measures in place to minimize the loss or even stop the loss completely is something that we as the brokers understand, and we can make calls and we can give certain guarantees upfront in terms of having additional firefighting costs, equipment being sent out, in some cases helicopters, and not all cases. I'm not just saying that if there's a veld fire that the insurer will send a helicopter. There are certain protocols, but these are the types of decisions that we have and we can take with the insurers on our speed dials if need be, in order to get the go ahead on certain issues. So, but as Rian said, I mean, incidents are not as simple as just a fire or a flood or a generator or that type of thing. I mean, there's such a diverse industry with so many diverse risks. So from a vehicle overturning with guests to kids being bitten by mambas in outlying areas, guests forgetting their heart medication in a foreign country where they're supposed to get, so now trying to get scripts and assisting guests. So it's all these types of things that are not necessarily taken or captured in an insurance policy, but it's part of a risk profile that you need to understand of your particular business before you enter into an insurance contract.
Sure, dear Walt, mambas. Yo, Rado, no mambas on Bryanston Country Club, hey? Who knew tourism could be so fraught with so many risks? Yo, I just want to hide. Okay.
Fortunately not.
No, fortunately not. No, absolutely. All right. So we've got one last question that I want to pose to all my panelists, and I'll call on each of you. And that is the kind of last question around a post-mortem. So if there was one little key piece of advice that you would offer to anybody listening on the call today, anybody who will be watching this recording, about what you have learned when it comes to the recovery aspect of dealing with an incident that you yourself have had to deal with, whether it's been from a broking perspective or as the company that has actually had to go through it. What is that one key post-mortem learning that you would like to offer to anyone listening to today's webinar? And I'm going to start with Rado, because there are no members on Bryanston Country Club.
Yeah, we don't have members, fortunately, but what I can advise, like we've been talking, the entire conversation was around preparations and make yourself knowledgeable about what could happen. But I also want to note that the insurance company also, they can advise for potential risks, and they can advise the clients. That's also crucial. For example, where they see a failing, let's say, for example, municipality infrastructure, they need to alert the authorities. That's going to minimize, or probably is not going to be a life loss, because if an insignificant event like a flood, we currently have a lot of rains in Gauteng, and if they see a client that is alerting that is a failing municipality structure, they need to alert the authorities. That's going to minimize a loss of life also.
Thank you, Rado. Rutilio.
Maybe I'm laboring the point some, but the thing is, sometimes you can throw money at a problem, but sometimes it's too late. It's a matter of the timing. This, I'm not talking in relation to the COVID claims. They were completely beyond the control. The speed with which they were paid and are still getting paid is completely beyond the control of ourselves as brokers, and to a certain extent the insurance industry themselves. But you need to get your claims done efficiently. I don't know, doesn't matter what claim we're talking about. You need to have your claims done efficiently. For them to be done and processed efficiently, you need to, number one, not to overstate the point, understand your business, understand it and understand it well. Number two, the start usually determines how you finish. The start usually determines how enjoyable the journey is, from the time the event has happened to the time that you're ultimately paid out or sorted out. So for me, how you start matters. As Devil said, if it's an emergency, you're a SATIP client, start with SATIP 24. They will help you with incident management. So your start is good. Any other event that's not an emergency related, that's not an emergency-like event, speak to your broker. Doesn't matter if it's over the weekend, it's a Saturday, it's a holiday, it's a Sunday. Speak to your broker. Like what Devil was saying, as SATIP, we have working groups for this, and certain decisions can be made over the weekend for you. Certain things can happen, even though maybe in your mind at the time, it is not possible. And like what Devil said, another voice might help you understand your situation better and manage it better. For me, that's what I can say with regards to the question asked.
Ah, such valuable advice there, Rutilio. How you start, that's really, really valuable. Thanks so much. Rian, over to you.
Yeah, I think I can just add to, like Rada and Rutilio said, it's, being prepared and ready. I think that's the number one, whether it's property on product level. So have the physical, asset, do the assessments, be prepared. Obviously there's unforeseen and then obviously situations which you can mitigate. Then the claim process, as Rutilio said, if you do that well, then obviously that journey will also go well and should not be as painful if you're ready and have the data ready, because having your own data ready, understanding your business, as the panelists said earlier, that is very important, and that also going to conclude the journey, because if you don't have your data and you don't understand your business, and this info is requested also by filling in the claims, it becomes painful, because now you also have to divert. You're not just have the aftermath you got to deal with. Now all of a sudden you also need to get the data and info ready, and it takes weeks, and so it's important during, well, even if if you're going to manage your business even effectively, you should have this data ready just by managing your business effectively, not just for insurance. So I think that is very important to understand, and I think then the whole journey becomes less painful, but yeah, a journey rather than an obstacle, which is just then part of the process, unfortunately, but that happens. So yeah, that's it from me.
Good point. Dewald, parting shot. What have you got to say?
Yeah, thanks, Natalia. So, I mean, insurance is more than just premiums and excesses. That's the result of a process that's in a road that you walk with your broker and your insurer. And my advice would be challenge your broker, brainstorm with your broker. Deliberate, see if there's an understanding, see if the insurer's got the understanding, make sure that the whatever is captured on the insurance policy is actually your understanding of what you wanted to have reflected on there. So it's not an easy process, it's a long process, it's a relationship process, and the more you work at it, the less your claims will become, and ultimately you'll only look at catastrophic types of events, which will ultimately then determine the level of the end result in lower premiums, better excesses, being more insurability, all these kinds of things. Because it's another aspect that needs to be understood is the more you claim, the less insurable you become, and it's I think my parting shot would be challenge, debate, brainstorm, and make sure that whatever your concerns are is captured. And also remember, not every incident and event can be insured by an insurance policy. There are certain instances that are absolutely uninsurable, but make sure that you understand which are these, and then you can prepare accordingly.
Okay, there you have it. So no to tsunamis, yes to better planning and working with people who know what they're doing. Panelists, thank you so much for joining me today. We have actually gone over an hour. I'm so sorry, everyone. I'm keeping you from your dinner and your wine. Rado, Ria, and Dewald, Rutilio, thank you so much for joining me today, and to everybody on the call. I know you have had a very tough week. We are thinking of you constantly, and if there's anything that we can do to support you as our tourism tribe, you please just let us know. Have a wonderful evening, everyone, and we will see you in the new year for another webinar. We're not doing any webinars for the rest of December. Have a very, very happy festive season. Many thanks, and yeah, we'll see you soon. Cheers.